You're dragged through the forum in chains, and the guard behind you shoves you toward a wooden post where two bodies hang, stiff and gray, nailed up for everyone to see. He tells you why they are there. Centuries ago, men were forced to dig this same sewer by hand, and the work was so miserable that some of them killed themselves rather than keep digging. The king at the time had their bodies crucified anyway, dead or not, and put on display so the rest of the crew would think twice before doing the same. You're not dead yet. You're not planning to be. But you're about to go where they went, and the tunnel underneath Rome doesn't care what century it is. Your crime doesn't matter much anymore. A debt you couldn't pay, a theft you got caught for, none of it changes what happens next. The magistrate has already decided. Sewer duty, no fixed end date. Rome doesn't send its own citizens down there if it can help it. That job goes to convicts, to slaves, to men who ran out of better options. And today, that's you. Somewhere under the city, a drain has backed up and someone has to go in after it. A guard hands you a torch, a wooden scraper, and a rope, and points you toward a hole in the ground that leads into the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer of Rome. The air hits you before your eyes even adjust. It's thick and wet, and it smells like something that died weeks ago and never got the chance to finish rotting. You climb down a slick ladder into water that reaches your knees, and your torch throws just enough light to see the tunnel curving away into black in both directions. There are no proper drain traps down here, none of the U-shaped bends that would seal off what's below from what's above, so anything small enough to fit through a pipe can climb straight up into a house. Rats, snakes, things nobody in the market wants to think about while they're eating dinner 2 floors above you. You start scraping the blockage loose, working blind by feel more than sight, and something brushes against your leg under the water. You freeze. Whatever it is moves again, faster this time, and you swing your torch down and catch a glimpse of a wet tail disappearing into a side pipe. A rat, probably. You tell yourself it was a rat. Your heart doesn't slow down for another 10 minutes, and you learn something that day that every sewer worker learns eventually. Down here, you don't get to see the thing before it touches you. Weeks pass and you start learning the tunnel the way you'd learn a language, which stretches hold standing water and which drain clean, where the ceiling is low enough to crack your skull if you stand up too fast, what a normal smell is and what a dangerous one is, because the waste breaks down into gases that build up in pockets with nowhere to go, methane and hydrogen sulfide, the kind that smells like rotten eggs right before it stops smelling like anything at all. Other workers tell you to trust your nose completely. If a stretch of tunnel suddenly smells like nothing, you leave, because that's usually the moment right before you stop being able to breathe. You're not alone down here, not exactly. There are other men working the same tunnels, most of them convicts like you, some of them slaves whose masters decided they were worth less than the trouble of replacing them. People call you stercorarii, manuremen, and they don't say it kindly. Up in the streets, nobody wants to stand near you or trade with you in daylight, even though half the city depends on someone doing this job. You're avoided in the sun and needed in the dark, and that's the whole shape of your life now. The waste itself is its own kind of enemy, separate from the gas and separate from whatever's swimming in it. You scrape blockages loose with your bare hands more often than the wooden tool, because the tool doesn't fit in half the gaps you need to clear, and every cut on your knuckles becomes an open door for whatever's living in the water. Men on your crew come down with fevers that keep them shaking for a week straight. One of them doesn't get back up from his. Nobody calls it anything specific. Down here, sickness doesn't need a name. It just needs an opening. And you've got plenty of those by the end of any given shift. One afternoon, a runner comes through the district shouting that a public bath 2 streets over just blew apart. Nobody had lit a torch near it on purpose. Gas had been building under the floor for days, trapped with nowhere to vent, and something finally set it off. 3 people are dead, one of them a cleaner you'd shared a meal with the week before. You go back into the tunnel the next morning anyway, because the alternative is worse. And you start checking every pocket of still air twice before you ever bring a flame near it. There are stories the older workers tell that you don't fully believe, except on the nights you're alone down there, and you do. One says a massive octopus once swam up through the sewer from the sea and climbed into a merchant's house to steal his stock of pickled fish, and that the men in Pozzuoli finally cornered a creature just like it and killed it with axes. You've never seen anything close to that size, but you've seen enough shapes moving in dark water to understand why the story spread and why nobody laughed it off completely. The tunnel is dark enough and wide enough that almost anything feels possible in it, right up until your torchlight proves it wrong. Before every shift, you stop at a small shrine near the drain entrance, a stone altar barely worth a second glance if you didn't know what it was for. It belongs to Cloacina, goddess of the sewer, and you leave a coin or a scrap of bread and ask her to keep the water calm and the tunnel from collapsing on you today. The other men joke about the gods of this trade the way soldiers joke before a battle, half real prayer and half nervous laughter, because Rome apparently found room in its religion for a god of flatulence and a god of manure too. It's a strange kind of comfort, praying to a goddess of sewage before crawling into one, but it's the only comfort available, so you take it. Years go by and your body changes with the work. Your hands toughen and scar over from scraping stone and metal. You develop a permanent stoop from years of walking hunched under low ceilings. You survive 3 separate close calls with bad air, 2 cave-ins that took out sections of tunnel you'd worked through days earlier, and 1 storm that sent water rushing through the system so fast you had to climb hand over hand up a slick shaft with the current dragging at your legs the entire way, certain each handhold would be the one that finally gave out. It doesn't. You make it to the surface soaked and shaking, and you go back down 2 days later, because that's the job. Then, one summer, the sky opens up over Rome and doesn't stop for 3 days straight. You're deep in the tunnel, clearing a blockage when you feel the current shift under your feet faster than it should, and you hear a sound coming from upstream that you've never heard before, a low roar building behind the dark. You turn toward the ladder, but the water reaches your waist before you're halfway there, then your chest, and the force of it lifts you clean off the tunnel floor and slams you sideways into stone. You grab for anything solid. Your fingers find a jagged edge in the wall and hold for a moment, just long enough to think you might actually get out of this one too, the same way you got out of the last flood and the one before it. You've done this before, you know how this is supposed to go. Then the current pulls harder than your grip can match. Your fingers slip off the stone, one at a time, and it takes you. Almost 2,000 years later, in a tunnel very much like the one you died in, a team of archaeologists in respirators and goggles worked their way through 86 meters of ancient sewer sealed beneath the ash of Herculaneum. They fill 750 sandbags with compacted waste that's been sitting undisturbed since before the volcano buried the town above it. Inside it, they find fruit pits, fish bones, grain husks, a bronze lamp, 60 coins, a gold ring that slipped off someone's finger through a drain hole centuries ago, and the signs of a parasite infection in what's left of a person who once worked this exact kind of tunnel for a living. Nobody knows his name. Nobody wrote down what he looked like or how he ended up down there. But 2,000 years underground, wearing a respirator that he never got to have, a scientist pulls a fragment of someone's ordinary, miserable, forgotten life out of the dark and holds it up to the light for the first time since Rome was still standing. It's the only monument men like him ever got.